Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After running through the news you need to know about, we're running through the fan canary answer fans questions. Not a ton to talk about today. Pretty much the same thing that we've been talking about. One really interesting thing that I think a lot of people have been wondering about, which is good, but let's get into the news you need to know about. This first news story is an update on Dalvin Cook, which we've been talking about for, it seems like, since the dawn of time. Currently, Dalvin Cook is the betting favorite, according to many outlets. Bleacher Report. Dalvin Cook is the betting favorite to land in New England. So if that is something that you guys want to pay attention to, it used to be Miami, I think, for a few months or weeks. And I switched to New England. There's been a lot of buzz with New England with some free agents recently. So we'll see where that goes. But this update in regards to the Dolphins comes from Pro Football Rumors. Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald said that recent comments that Dalvin Cook has made that he declined to visit with an unnamed club. Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald reports that it was not the Dolphins he was speaking about. And that the Dolphins remain interested. Barry goes on to say the Dolphins still remain interested in Dalvin Cook playing for them. So there have been reported about 6 teams are in the mix. Usually it's a lot less than that when it's reality. Some of these things are always overblown. It's usually 2 teams that really have a shot at it. We'll see what happens. You know, we're getting closer and closer to training camp. They're going to have to make a decision. Dalvin Cook is, especially being a running back, I would think you would want to make that decision earlier if it was up to you, obviously. So we'll see what happens. But again, there still seems to be a connection between the Dolphins and Dalvin. But there have been New England rumors been swirling. Now, I don't know why he would pick New England over Miami. You know, he's already said that he's a perfect scheme fit here, which he is. It's a really fun offense to play in. I don't know why you wouldn't want to go, and it's Miami. He's from there. So what's the problem? Now, I'm saying this if the money's the same. If that's the goal, if money's the goal, then that's a different story. But if the money's the same, then I don't understand why it wouldn't be Miami over every club, really. I mean, his own words said it was a perfect fit. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure Mike is championing this pretty hard. You know, one thing I will say before we move on from this, if he is still a free agent when training camp starts, I doubt he will be for long after that, because pads get on and it's 11 on 11 and you finally really get to see what running backs can do. And maybe that will push a club like the Dolphins to making a move like that. If someone underperforms or isn't as good as they thought that he would be, maybe, you know. And I don't want to say, you know, this or that, this and that. I don't want to speak badly about, you know, A-Chain. I don't want to put those vibes out there. But who knows what'll happen. But I would, if he does make it to training camp, he will not be a free agent very long after that, if I had to guess. So yeah, nothing too crazy to update. I'm sure everybody's been following this. One thing I want to bring up, Tyreek Hill recently said that Robbie Anderson has looked good, which is something I just wanted to throw in here as a little update. I think he said it on his podcast, if I'm not mistaken. It was quoted and it's been circulating around Dolphin stuff. So, you know, he had a really good OTAs. We covered that here. He looked really good. And Braxton Berrios, from things that I've seen, or at least I've seen, he's looked really good as well. So it's going to be really fun. I think their third receiver is better than it was last year. God bless Trent Sherfield. But Trent was a phenomenal blocker, and he was a good deep threat. But he wasn't the most ideal third receiver, especially if you had Waddle, Hill, and Trent on the field at the same time. Trent was used in sub packages a lot, where it kind of tipped the hand to teams of what we're going to do, and that's something Mike needs to get better at, is personnel grouping in his second season as the head coach. Because anytime we took Hill or Waddle off the field, you kind of knew what we were going to do. We were very limited. And Trent really, if Waddle Hill, it was really Gesicki who was that third receiver. At least those are the routes they gave him. And really, if those two were on the field, there really wasn't anyone to kind of complement them. And if you have Braxton, I think is the perfect fit. And then Robbie, if Robbie can play in the slot, usually he's throughout his entire career has played on the outside. So I'm interested to see. I think that's a way better lineup than a year ago from the receiving group. Not to mention some younger guys that might do some things. So it's nice to see that Robbie Anderson. And again, this is a guy who was consistently around 900 yards throughout his career, which is perfect for a third receiver. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Isaiah Wynn to vie for Dolphins left guard job. It seems, and again we've talked about this, Austin Jackson and Austin Jackson and Taron Armstead seem to be the tackles. I mean, Chris Greer pretty much confirmed that. And again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors. Now that leaves, it seems that Liam Eichenberg, at least the rumor is, they could switch Isaiah Wynn out for Eichenberg, so Eichenberg would be on the bench, which I think makes sense, because he's got a nice skill set where he can play different positions as well. So he's a nice flex player in case someone gets hurt. But the idea of Isaiah Wynn at guard, and then you have Hunt at guard, and then you have Connor Williams at center, I think that's a better lineup than a year ago. And Wynn can also play tackle, which is really, really nice, and he's played right tackle was it left tackle or right tackle? One of the tackle positions he played at a very high level 2 seasons ago. So that's also really nice that if Armstead does miss some time, he can step in. And the one that cannot miss time this year is Austin Jackson. There's no reason for him to. He's a young player. He's barely played football. Even in college, he missed a lot of time. So he needs to, be there for the majority of the season. But yeah, I like Isaiah Wynn at left guard. And I think, obviously Hunt at right guard, and then you have Connor at center. That's a nice interior. And Isaiah Wynn has a very nice pedigree. He's played very high-level football in the past. And I forgot, honestly, when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot we signed Isaiah Wynn. Hopefully he can return to form like 2 seasons ago. And one thing I want to say about Wynn before we move on, really good run blocker when he was playing well. And just an all-around nice player. But that's something that I think is a big deal, is he's a physical player, which is something that the interior has missed. And now if you have Austin Jackson, who's not playing guard anymore because he could not, and at least in my opinion, was not a very, very good run blocker, especially at guard. But now that you have Wynn, Hunt, and Connor and the interior, that is a much, much better lineup in terms of run blocking than what they've had for years. Like, that is by far the most physical. And honestly, I would love to see the numbers on this. In terms of weight and height, I feel like that's by far the biggest lineup that they've had. Like, there's no way it's not. I mean, Connor Williams is a very big center for a center. I mean, he played tackle in college, obviously moved to guard, and then moved to center. He's a bigger player at that position than Wynn and Hunt, huge, ginormous people. Very big. So I think for all of those reasons, that's just a way better interior than the Dolphins have had in years. And that's one of the big issues that they've had, is being physical in the middle of their line, and I feel like they really, really fixed that. And Armstead, who's already a really good two-way tackle, Austin Jackson really doesn't have to be involved in the run game at all for the Dolphins to be successful. And they just need to be marginally better than they were a year ago, because they were so bad at running the football, and they've been so bad since Tua's got here running the football on a consistent basis. So I think this line has the potential to be pretty good at running the football this year, which is good. Especially with Wynn moving to guard. They do have nice depth on the line, too. So that really does it for the news. Dalvin Cook's still out there. It's nice to hear wins at playing guard. Dalvin, obviously we don't know. It's like, what the heck is Dalvin Cook going to do? I'm excited for training camp to start. I'm the number one thing I'm excited to see is, well, two things. I think the number one thing is, how does Austin Jackson play? And then how does Tua do against Vic Fangio's defense? I think those are the two things that I'm excited about the most. So let's move on to the fan Q&A. Sorry, I mean, the podcast has been getting shorter and shorter just because it's like we have really nothing to talk about. It's the dead period. There's been no update on like a real substantial one on the Tyreek Hill thing, in case anybody's wondering. Alright, so let's get into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. This first question comes from Richard. He says, what about the Dolphins bringing in running back Leonard Fournette, the ex-Tampa Bay Buck? Cook wants too much money. I think the Dolphins can get through the season with the running backs they have. This is a great point, and I would rather, if you sat me down right now, who would you rather have, Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette? I would rather have Leonard Fournette. And you guys might think I'm insane, but I think he is such a different back than what the Dolphins have. And he could be, you want to talk about getting yards after contact on a consistent basis. He just adds a power element and a physicality to the Dolphins that they just don't really have on their team right now. He's a different type of player. I think it's a nice mix-up to what they already have on their roster. It could really help, the old cliche, it could really help in the fourth quarter having someone like that who is just strong and can not just win on his speed, but can really punish defenses on a consistent basis, and especially in the red zone. That's a big, especially in the second half in Miami in the red zone, that's a huge advantage to have a player like that. And the Dolphins really haven't had a true power back in well over a decade. I can't really remember who I would, I don't know. They haven't really had one. I was thinking about Daniel Thomas, no, Sean Moreno. I think that's a great example of what a power back can do at home in Miami. So I actually agree that I would rather have Leonard Fournette at a cheaper price, and just the player and the stuff that he brings to the table. I mean, this is a guy who was a top 7 pick, who I still think is very talented, and he does fit the blocking scheme. I think he can do both, and it's a nice change of pace. And Mike McDaniel is a very creative head coach, so he could change the blocking scheme on plays for Leonard Fournette. I could totally see him doing that, drawing specific plays just for him. So if he had to, I don't think he would have to, but that I think any team who gets Leonard Fournette is getting a very good player for very cheap. This next question comes from SM, so it's a great question, Richard. This next question comes from SM. He says, quarterback and defenses were the two areas that let us down the most when we needed them late in the season. Have these areas been addressed to your liking? Yeah, I would say so. And also the O-line, I think, is better from Mike's scheme this year. So that's another good thing. So yeah, I would say defensively, absolutely. Adding Vic Fangio. And I love going through like, oh, this is what the Dolphins have, and then you get to Vic, you kind of forget about Vic. At least sometimes I do, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Vic is the defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of reasons why. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey, they have way more depth at corner this year with Cam Smith coming in and Kader Kohu. Nick Needham's coming back. They were able to bring him back as well. So I think the defense is much better than it was a year ago. And I like the additions of some of the outside linebackers. And they were able to keep Emmanuel Ogbah too, which I think is a big deal. This next question comes from Mike. He says, Skaggs, I really enjoy your podcasts. Just curious if you watch other Dolphins YouTubers. If so, who do you find to be the most insightful? I don't really. I'm sorry. I have a very specific. I don't know why. I just never There's only listen. There's a ton of sports radio talk. There really is. And I only listen to two outlets. I listen to for basketball. I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast, which I think a lot of people do. And for football, I usually listen to Chris Sims Unbuttoned, which is a very good podcast. Even though I know a lot of Dolphins fans disagree with Chris as an analyst, but he's just a different type of person. He goes in depth a lot more than anyone else, and all the guests he has on his show are really good as well. In terms of bringing on people who are experts on the betting side of things, I think some of those shows are really interesting as well. So those are really the two people that I listen to. It has nothing to do with anybody who does the videos. It's just that other than ESPN, which I cannot stand ESPN. I can't watch ESPN. And I can't watch Fox Sports either. I think both of those are terrible. And I would say the Dan Patrick Show, especially for when he has old athletes on, I think is awesome. The interviews that he does. It reminds me of when Steve Sable would do them back in the day, which I think, especially football, is missing terribly. And I think, honestly, basketball too. No offense to a lot of the interviews, especially for TNT or ABC or the bigger networks, the interviews aren't good. They're the same questions over and over again. And you bring someone on Sable or Dan who knows the history of the game itself and the player at an in-depth level, and you can have them longer than 5 minutes on a halftime show. So yeah, I would say those are the shows that I think are good sports stuff that I watch. And if I'm not watching that, I'm watching, some video games or stuff like that. So this question comes from KC Fanatic. He says, power ratings across the internet show no respect. Power ratings show across the internet no respect to the Fins. In my thought, Miami can beat anyone. Do you agree? Also, Cincy and KC, in my opinion, pose the only obstacle to the Super Bowl. Your thoughts? I think, honestly, out of all the years of me being a Dolphins fan, this year especially, I felt the love around the major media people. I think they've been higher on the team than ever before. So I would actually, I'm not saying I disagree with that because I don't really know about the power rankings, but I think the feel, at least nationally, is very positive. And it's not normally that way, and I never have said that on the show until now. But KC and Cincy are both tough teams. Buffalo is still a tougher team, not a tougher than them, but tough. They have a lot of experience, and they've had the same core for a long time, which does matter. And yeah, I think we're close with all of them. I think we should have beat Cincinnati last year. We almost did with Teddy Bridgewater. So, I was hearing Bills fans, and this is a good. They were complaining oh, we got so unlucky at the end. It's that is the most delusional. And it's do you understand how unlucky the Dolphins? Them and the Niners, in my opinion, were the unluckiest teams last year. So, at least in my opinion, I don't think Buffalo is top 10 in terms of unlucky last year. Anyway, I think the gap has definitely shrunk, and I think it was shrinking last year. But it's definitely gotten even shorter this year. And I'm excited. I'm most excited I've been for a season in a long time. So, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys enjoyed. All great questions from the boys. Always appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.